How many of you have been to Canada in winter? I have to tell you, I have experienced minus 47 Celsius in Canada. So don't go to Winnipeg in the middle of winter. That's all I can tell you. It's very cold. It can be very cold. Minus 47. You start your car and you let it run for 30 minutes before you can drive anywhere with it. Uh, just a quick difference between the temperature is not the only difference between Canada and Singapore. 27 kilometers from east to west, if I have it right. Um, it's about 6,000 kilometers from east to west in Canada. So we have certain different realities, but we share a lot of the same challenges and opportunities to champion sport for a better society, for creating what we need and believe we can do through sport. Before we start, I would just ask all of you to take 1 minute and write down what you think your greatest skill or gift is in coaching. I'm not going to ask you to share it. I just want you to write that down. So take 1 minute. You don't have to share it with anybody, and actually write it down. Okay. By way of show of hands, how many of you found that difficult to do? No? A little bit? Okay, that's excellent. Coaches, you need to take care of yourself. Remember that as you go through your journey as coaches, because the best way to create better athletes, participants, and citizens is actually through modeling that behavior for yourself. So as Sergio closed off his speech, I want you to know that that is a belief and a theme that we share around the world. Coaches do need to take care of themselves. So the little bit of Homer is a good thing. And I left my clicker on the table. So if someone can just pass that to me. Thank you. Perfect. Okay. Very quickly, a little bit of a difference in Canada to share with you so we can talk a little bit further about our coaching system and some of the experiences we share. Canada has a national coaching agency. We have the profession and education in one body, the Coaching Association of Canada. We work with 66 sports in every province and territory, and we train and develop in partnership coaches from the community level to high performance Olympic, Paralympic, and beyond the Olympic Games program. Each year, approximately 60,000 coaches take one of our workshops. So I know you're about 5 million people, we're about 33 million people. So that gives you a little bit of context. So you can see our 4 priorities as an organization. As an organization, we're actually a very small piece of the puzzle. While we have a quality assurance and national standards and accreditation function, so we actually accredit sport programs for our NSAs, our bigger job is actually to mobilize coaching resources to improve coaching and athlete impact throughout the country. And so what I love about being in this room is that you have the Institute, you have the government, you have the agency, you have NROC, you have Coach SG, and you have the National Youth Sports Institute. You have everyone in the room with you, helping you to get better. And I think that is something that you should be applauded for and congratulated for, because together you will make a difference. And you will make a difference if you believe that community coaching and high performance coaching is equally valuable. It is so critical in this room that each of you believes that your role in whatever sphere of athlete or participant coaching that you're doing is your passion, it's your belief, it's what you want to do and stay to impact life, the life of those individuals, the life of that child first, that participant first. And often that can be a little challenging because as humans, we want immediate impact. We want to know right away that we've made a difference. Oftentimes, it doesn't come right away. It comes 40 years later or 60 years later. And so we need to find the right way to measure good coaching over time, not just at your national championship results or your school championship games. That's really key. And so I challenge all of you to define what that is and to be able to answer that question. You should be able to answer, how do I know I'm a good coach? How do I know I'm a good coach? And actually, you answered it already by starting off with writing down what is good about your coaching and you as a person. And so one of the reflective processes that we have in the National Coaching Certification Program is our NCCP, which is the name of our coaching education program, is this reflective process of stop, start, and continue. So you wrote down one of your great skills, continue that skill. Do not lose that skill. That is something you should nurture and develop as much as you need to grow and build your strengths. This is a revised national coaching certification program. In fact, we worked with Singapore 20, 30 years ago in your levels program, and since then our system has changed significantly. And so really it looks like an opera chart, but I think the important thing is that we value and create coaching education for coaches who work at instruction level, at community level, at the high performance level, and that we create the right type of education for all of those types of coaches. And that is based on the long-term athlete development model of that sport. So Canada embarked on a significant change in implementing LTAD 20 some years ago, and there are hurdles that come with that, and we'll talk a little bit about that. But essentially, what we knew we needed to do is the sport needed to build its own LTAD, its sport-specific LTAD, and once that is done, and only once that is done, you can build your coach development model. And so this reflection of a fan of type of coaches at different stages and stage-appropriate training for coaches is critical. And the notion of master is that you can be a coach, a community coach. You can be a high performance coach and stay at that stage because you love that stage. However, it's not a one-stop education that you need to be the best coach to have ongoing, continual professional development. You must continue your education. It's why you're here today. It's the value that you will get by sharing, engaging, hearing about different systems, about how you can take forward what you hear today and apply it in your own environments. Reach out and find opportunities to help yourself grow. The most successful coaches are those coaches who strive for continuous learning. I simply wanted to share with you and reinforce with you that LTAD is the fundamental principle that builds sport in Canada throughout the system. And we'll talk a little bit about that impact. However, what this does allow you to do is actually see the stages of our community competition and instruction and how we align it to the stages of LTAD. Now, there is one difference in Canada that I might share with you that's very different than in Singapore. In fact, we have a high percentage of community level coaches who are actually parents, the mom, dads who coach for about 5 years, and they achieve a limited amount of education in order to fulfill that function. So in fact, in Canada, the number one voluntary the contribution is actually in sport. So that's a very unique part of our system. We do see sports where we have professionals and remunerated coaches right from the community stages. But they're not all that way. And so that is a bit of a difference in terms of how we engage in coaching at a community level versus the way that you are engaging. The difference is that while the parent coach may have a limited amount of skill set, they work in an environment that must have the complementary skill set to make sure that it's stage appropriate and the appropriate training and development and fun for those athletes at those stages. So that's done through a technical director or a senior coach or however that needs to work for that sport. And for you, you have the gift of being professionals, of having that skill set. And because you are the gift of being a professional, you also have the responsibility to seek out and develop your education and your learning so that you can play the best role in the life of the young individuals that you are coaching. This is just another way for me to show you how critical it is for us to integrate LTAD into everything we do. Everything we talk about, the foundation must start with LTAD. It must start with LTAD. It's a non-negotiable. And so how you truly build a robust sports system requires all of the partners who are around this table and your buy-in. And I really hope I have the chance to chat with you a little bit about that as we go through the day and in the afternoon if we have a conversation with the panel around what needs to happen to help you be better, because we do recognize the strains and the stresses of coaching. And a lot of our conversation is about how we help coaches to manage that change in that environment, and that's really critical. The one unique feature that I think is worth discussing, and I hope to have the opportunity to continue the discussion with Vincent and Troy as well, is the need for standard coach developers, so those who coach the coaches. It is so critical that there is a seamless type of training um, between all types of coaches. There is a really important role that that type of coach developer can play to help coaches. Basically, it is a chain. It's the chain and sequence of events, and so it's really critical that you have a trained workforce who coaches the coaches. And I bring that up because in Canada is one of the hallmarks of our quality assurance in coaching education is to be able to create a system that has coach developers who can either work in many sports or work across sports or work in general sports, but they all receive the same type of training. And so I hope to continue that conversation because I know that the alignment between community and high performance is so important to Singapore. Okay, I'm going to shift gears for about 10 minutes. I have had the privilege in my sporting career of being the CEO of two national federations, the Cycling Canada and the Canadian Canoe Association, or now CanoeKayak Canada. So those were the years that I was involved. I'm going to start off with cycling and talk a little bit about the time frame at which I was there. And these conversations are really relevant because I appreciate and I feel the pain that coaches feel having been in an environment directly trying to support our coaches when you're talking to parents about change, when you're talking to parents about not the tremendous strain and the tremendous level of competition that needs to happen to shift culture. And I know in the back of their mind, they are thinking, this will not lead to my child's success, this change. In fact, they are wrong. And so what you as a system need to be able to do is talk about why it's so important. When I went into cycling, they were at an all-time low. They had lost the trust of the funding agencies. In fact, they had most of their funding cut, very bare bones. They had the wrong people in the wrong jobs, and they didn't know how to get out of that. They had a culture of valuing road cycling beyond any of the other disciplines. They had tension between BMX, which was becoming an Olympic sport for the first time in 2008, which had been out of their system. They thought that a 50th place finish in road cycling was better than a bronze medal in track cycling. Can anybody relate to that? Yeah? Okay. The great news is they had a desire for change. They opened the door. And I have to tell you that if the door is not open for you for change, it's a real challenge to get in there and make change. So the first question you have to ask yourself is, do they know they have a problem? Okay, so that's a bit of a question with parents in some levels. Do you know there's a problem in the way we're building our participants and our athletes? And if the answer is no, there's no problem, then the conversation is very different than if it's yes, we have a problem. Because the answer that you will have, or the conversation that you'll have after that, is very different. It's two different starting places. I have to share with you a very funny story because, I have to talk about ice hockey just a little bit, right? So in ice hockey, which is the National Hockey League, is very much in the dollars and eyes and minds of the parents of their young athletes. Hockey Canada has done a significant amount of work to change that culture. However, you still have the hockey parent. And one of the ways that a brilliant coach manages that circumstance is he'll gather the parents before the season starts, and he'll say to them, and this is in the competitive league, so allow me to shift that thinking for you for a minute. And he'll say, okay, how many of you think it's important to win the game? All the parents, raise your hands. Everybody's hands raised. And then he would say, okay, how many of you think your child is the missing ingredient to win in the last 8 minutes of the game? So that is a magical way to make all parents understand, in fact, they're all thinking the same thing. So that opens the door for a different type of conversation with your parents. Anyway, it's just a humorous story that I think, can break the tension in a serious conversation sometimes with your parents. So humor can go a long way. So I'm going to come back to cycling. And that's a bit hard to see, but I'm gonna try to summarize it for you. When they implemented long-term athlete development, they knew that they were going to have a lot of resistance for change. So it's not just about you, the coach, on the side of the pool deck or on the side of the pitch or on the track. It is about how the whole system changes, because it's unfair for a system to ask a coach to change and to not change itself around the coach. Okay? So ultimately, look at that, it works. Okay. So ultimately, I think the critical piece here is leaders. And the leaders are your officials, your athlete retention, and your coaches. They're over here. But guess what? There's parents right there. It's creating the resources for parents. Your parents are leaders. And so that is the challenge, and the best thing that you can do is try to find a way to address that up front. And so this was part of the critical path to implement change. So you can see that it involved the coaches, the competitions, the organization, the leaders, and the facilities. If your facilities don't lend themselves to multi-sport development, how are you going to implement multi-sport training? So you have to think about all of these things as you're building and implementing your LTAD change. The other thing that as an NSAs, our NSAs were required to build their sport-specific LTAD as a condition of federal government funding. Non-negotiable. They had a timeline, but they were required to build it, and they were required, and they are continuing to be required to demonstrate the implementation of their LTAD. They must do it. And they also must get endorsement from their board or their executive. So these were some of the critical steps that they felt they needed to take in terms of changing their whole system, not just the coaches, their whole system. There's nothing like a picture. this was an absolute shift in thinking for that organization. And it was an absolute um, intentional move to publish in their whole system throughout the country, their whole LTAD, their whole principles, their whole sport, but also visuals like this. And I think, you know, as you work through what you're trying to build within your changes in your LTAD and in the development pathway for your athletes, you have to acknowledge and share and talk and create collateral that helps you to view and define. I mean, it's brilliant, right? These images here, they're brilliant. They're great. It changes the conversation even in this room as you walk by it. That's what you need to see. It's outstanding. I'm going to shift and talk about canoe kayak. So canoe kayak was a very different sport. The cycling was a little bit more provincially driven, and then canoe kayak is a club based sport. So really, there are 60 clubs across the country, 33 million, with maybe, I don't know, probably 3,000, 4,000 high performance athletes. That's it. Very small sport in Canada. And so the reality for that type of sport was that it was a very club driven sport. That is a very big difference and a different beast to deal with when you're dealing with a change like LTAD, because you have very strong club based coaches who create their own internal environment. And if you are not able to share and engage and motivate that club head coach, then you are not able to affect change in a system across the country. They had very technically proficient coaches, but they had coaches who were motivated at a very young stage, like junior worlds, to achieve a performance that was not appropriate for that stage of athlete. So we could see the trends. We could see the trend of performance, junior worlds, and a misconception that it would lead to an Olympic medal, and it never did. Very rarely in certain clubs would we ever see that transfer, that conversion rate from junior worlds to Olympic medal. And so it's not about not getting a junior worlds medal, it's about getting a junior worlds medal at the right time. And so that was the type of conversation that was needed. We needed to get into the system and have conversation about the stage appropriate development. And the way we were able to do that within canoeing is to have a person responsible within the NSA who needed to own coach and athlete development, the two together, coach and athlete development. And then it was a matter within that sport of an outreach strategy that would allow conversation in the environment of the coach and the athlete. And yes, we had national conferences, but it was absolutely very much supplemented by in the environment of the athlete. So an incredibly strong system, and also a very risky system in some ways if you're not able to engage effectively with those coaches in terms of LTAD. Because what happens is you end up working within an environment with those individuals and then you leave. And so it's simply not a conversation about the technical benefits, it's an inspirational conversation about a desire and a motivation to change. In London, CanoeKayak won 3 Olympic medals. We had 7 athletes, 6 boats, and 3 Olympic medals. It was a 50% conversion rate for us. And so we were really thrilled with our performances. Mark de Young won a bronze medal in the K1 200. A couple of months before, when he was training, dropped a weight on his knuckle, broke his hand. That is a curveball that I can only tell you about, is a stressful one for the coach and for the athlete and for the system. However, what we were able to do is work really well with our sports scientists and with the team and the system to allow that athlete to manage a recovery plan that would allow him to get to the games. So why is this important? Well, I think it's important because he was able to recover and by a hair. So you can see the 0.003 seconds difference between him qualifying for the final and out of the semifinal and not making it, and then having to race 2 days later and actually make and perform. And the reason I bring this particular case up is because the training for that mental toughness and that ability to perform on demand at the games didn't start when he hit the national team. Of course, we have the sciences and the technology that helps us when we reach national team level or at different stage appropriate times in the development. But it actually started in the holistic development of that person at the community and club level. He was able to leverage the strength that his younger coaches gave him as an athlete to create the platform to build the strength and the resilience and the mental toughness he needed to perform at the Olympic level. So that's part of your job in terms of the community coach. And I just want to play a quick video about multi-sport development in Alexandre Paty, a multiple medal winning athlete.
Hi Alex, so I understand you're on Parliament Hill right now. You've just hosted the Canada Day celebrations. Tell me, how did you end up here?
Well, there's a funny story to that. I actually fell into a pool when I was a kid.
You fell into a pool?
I fell into a pool, as simple as that, and then I ended up here.
Wow, that sounds easy enough. So there was no more work involved than that?
Well, there was a little bit of work. I mean, I did 20 years of diving after falling in that pool. Lots of training, lots of competing. Oh, I did tons of sports. When I was a kid, we were a very sport-oriented family. I did football for a season, I did swimming, I played tennis, I did a lot of alpine skiing for at least 10 years before I had to choose with diving. And then diving became my passion, became my dream, and going to the Olympics. And I have one more to go, at least one more Olympics to go.
All right.
To realize my dreams.
Well, good luck. Thank you for sharing your story. You're going to be great.
Thanks a lot.
Alex was a very interesting case because in an early specialization sport, it really creates a different environment and a different conversation about early sport specialization. He was performing at the age of 12 when he was still growing, and when there were certain expectations in terms of the diving culture of achieving medals and achieving performances. He weathered that storm really well and went on to perform for Canada internationally and at Olympic Games for over several Olympic Games. But the message is still the same. I could put up a lot of our Olympic medalists on this screen and they will tell you the same thing. They did other sports. They had the opportunity and the experience to create a better person. The ability for the person to develop actually, I believe, has to happen before you can create the platform for the physical person to develop. It's not about driving home the physical stamina and strength all at once and thinking that the person will develop after. In fact, it's quite the opposite. And so he is a living example of that and had a great career, and we're very proud of him. This is another way of looking at it. So in terms of early sport specialization, which is the challenge that we all need to overcome, why is it that we take our children and we expect them to go through school and understand all of the disciplines, the arts, the math, the sciences, the social sciences, and we believe that is an important development of the person? But it's almost like we're saying to them, okay, no, we want you to be an accountant, so forget about the arts and geography from grade 4 on, and we're just going to put you in math. That's really kind of what we're saying as we talk about early sport, forcing our children to choose too early. And so I think that's an interesting conversation to have with parents as well. The discipline, why would you change a discipline in their schooling at the age of 10 when you're not doing that in their educational studies? This is another example. This is football, so Canadian or North American football, so not football soccer, but football. This is Coach Meyer. 73-8, I think, is the win-loss over 6 seasons. he only recruits multi-sport athletes. So this is one of his mantras. You can look him up on the web. He's actually very interesting. He wants athletes who played a lot of sports throughout their career. 42 of the 47 athletes had multi-sport paths. So what does it all mean? Canada went through a change about 20 years ago, and now I can share with you a little bit about the outcome at the Olympic level. So we're simply talking about that Olympic level. If we take a look at top 8, the pipeline increases. Take a look at top 5, the pipeline increases. Take a look at top 3, the pipeline increases. Top results, medal rank. We always do our medal ranks and total medals. So what does that mean? That means that there's stage appropriate development of the athlete happening, and that is the pipeline. So it's not just about 2012, it's about 2016, where the performance is increased once again, and now it will be about 2020 in the Summer Games. And so the metrics that we use as a country with our experts that own the podium is not just about medals. They continuously watch the pipeline. They continuously watch the athlete depth chart. They continuously watch the coach depth chart. It's important to manage and make sure that the pipeline of athletes is coming in. So if your athletes, your participants get to the train to train stage and then you lose all of them, that's telling you something about the type of coaching that's going on. If they get to the train to compete or the train to win stage and you see the drop off, that's telling you something about your performance. If you see train to win and then conversion to Olympic medals, that's telling you something about your development. And so that's an important metric for Canada in terms of how we manage our system and create the opportunity for the development of our system. And so this is a very important metric that we all own within the sports system, from community to high performance. Just very quickly, this is a resource that we have for our parents on LTAD. I urge you to try and create and support materials for yourself. If you go to coach.ca, we have a ton of resources. Enjoy it and share and take what you want. Go to your sport in Canada. So if it's Swim in Canada, you'll find their LTAD model. You have a great leader in Troy over there, who I know watches all of these things. We had a great conversation yesterday about the development of the system and the requirement of the alignment between youth sport and high performance, and so that's really exciting. But you need the resources and the education of the parents to do so. Okay, I will just very quickly move on because I'm conscious of time. If you want to create short-term athlete participation and you want to sacrifice short-term long-term performance, that's one way to go about it, of challenging and maybe ruining the potential that your country has. And so I just ask you to think about that. And I know that the parents have pressure for short-term and expectations for short-term performance. However, that's what needs to change. And so I think what you see, and the challenge and the output of what you'll see, is this. You'll see the wrong skills being developed. The conversation we had 20 years ago or 10 years ago in some sports in our system was how athletes would reach the national level, and then the first 2 years were spent retraining the biomechanics or the technical proficiency of the athlete. What a waste. So the skill development that is so critical at the train to train stage affects how that national team career or that Olympic performance will be achieved. And the Summer Olympics only happen every 4 years. So that's a critical piece. I laughed when I saw the presentation because, of course, I had to have the iceberg too, and it really is because sometimes I bring this up that you know, the 100% of the problems are known by the frontline workers. Well, coaches can be frontline workers, and so you know the problems. And so the trick for you sometimes is how you swim upstream to communicate and share. And I challenge you to do that because that's the only way to get to the 4% at the top who maybe don't necessarily know the problems. So that's a challenge to all of you to play your role in sharing the challenge and the problems that exist within your sport through to the high performance. You got to swim together because if you don't, you're not going to achieve what you need to achieve. Alignment is critical. And so it's about the people, it's about the process, it's about the content, and it's about the environment. So in your conversations about alignment, about how you're going to change the iceberg statistics, these are the conversations that you need to have. And this is what we know we needed to do within Canada. These were the components of what we needed to change, and that was critical. This is really just about the partners who need to be involved. And now I'm going to take 2 minutes and I'm just going to talk very quickly about alignment within Canada. We knew we needed to work harder with our Olympic Committee and with Own the Podium, which is our technical agency, and in coaching education. We needed to make sure that our NSAs saw the three organizations working together and aligned and delivering the same messages and supporting the NSA work. That's critical. And so we were able to create and craft a program around the high performance piece that supports the development and aligns the development in high performance teams. Very quickly, and I'll just talk about this, it's not just at the national team level that the critical alignment piece is important. In fact, if you look here, this is what we would call the high performance 0 to 4 years, so the train to win, so 4 years from the medal podium. That's one type of coaching education. Then you have the 5 to 8 years, so at the learn to train, train to win stage. That's another type of coach development that we needed to match to our national team or to our athletes. And then there's the 8-year plus, or we would call that 9 to 12 years. If there's not alignment in the education piece in these components of years of athlete development, there's going to be a gap and there will be a break somewhere. What we have to see happen is our technical directors or our high performance directors become more intentional and more active at recruiting coaches and developing coaches who work at the 5 to 8 year space or at the 9 to 12 year space. Obviously, you can, if you have your limited resources, you're going to focus here, but that's really important. And the other thing to know is coaches who are at this stage of coaching, this LTA day stage of coaching, don't always want to go over here. It's not about that. It's about developing the coach to be the best coach at the 5 to 8 year mark. It's not, a coach doesn't always want to progress through the system. That's wrong. It's about getting them in their peak performance, the coach peak performance at this stage. And yes, some coaches will have the ability and the desire and the impact to move into the train to win stage, but the majority don't. The system with all these three without these three types of coaches is critical. We can't have it. Very quickly, I'm going to talk a little bit about the type of education that we have here and the way we're looking at it. So if you think about 9 to 12 years out, 8 to 5 years out, and then 0 to 4 years out. In this stream here, this is pre-packaged coaching education. It's like a just in case. Got it, 5 minutes. Just in case, all right? So I'm going to give you all the information just in case you need it. It's prescribed, it tends to be teacher-led, it tends to be very structured. But then when you get to the 5-year phase out, you actually see a shift. Yes, you will have some instruction, but you'll be more involved and engaged in developing your own learning plan. You'll have more communities of practice. You will pick specific topics to your environment. You will get into the highly customized type of learning that you need. And then over here in the expert coach, that's when you really take charge. That's when you're refining your skills. That's when you have the ability to apply what you believe is your coaching philosophy and challenging and shaping and building that. And at this stage, that's when you need to create the cycle of development and share your expertise and mentorship and develop others. So what it means is you go from just in case education to just in time education. Okay, just in time. I'm going to learn what I need to learn to be good in this next 6 months or this year. And that's really just about the types of learning that you do, how you manage it, and who you reach out to, and how you build your own coaching education. Top 10 skills. Okay, so World Economic Forum. Take a look at what the top skills are from 2015 to 2020. And this applies to coaching. This applies to what Sergio was talking about. Complex problem solving, sports complex. So think about this as you design your learning plan, as you think about where your skill sets are. Think about this as you're building your young participants and athletes. This is what the workforce needs to be strong at. Professional coaching. We need more professional coaches, and we need better working conditions for professional coaches. And I think that's a worldwide challenge and a worldwide problem, and I see some of you giggling, so yes, talk to me later. Please go to coach.ca. We have lots of resources. Our job is to build resources to help coaches, and it's about coaches around the world. So I encourage you to go to coach.ca and find what you need to pull from there that helps you in some way and share it within your community. I admire coaches. I live every day trying to help coaches be better. I admire all of you in the room. I think what you do to grow and build young people is one of the most spectacular jobs in the world. And with that, I say thank you very much.